And we're live, Chairman, Leader.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the Cabinet meeting. My name is Jonathan Lester, and I am the Leader of the Council. I'll be chairing this meeting. In addition to those councillors present in the room, we have some councillors joining our meeting remotely. I'll now check that they can hear us. We have Councillor Swindlehurst. Can you hear us?
I can. Thank you very much, Leader. Good afternoon.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Fagan.
Afternoon, Leader. I can hear you. Thank you. I won't be able to stay the whole meeting, unfortunately.
Okay, but you're very welcome. So thank you. And we have group leaders in attendance. So we have Councillors James, Councillor Jones, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Matthews. So welcome. We also have Councillor Hitchener here as well. Very welcome. So we also have a number of officers in attendance who will introduce themselves if they are called to speak. So now, thank you. I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting is available for public viewing on the Council's website. The Council is also streaming this meeting live on Herefordshire Council's YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. I'll just make one. Yeah, that's done. Excellent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If any member of the public attending or wish to be filmed or photographed, please notify a member of staff. Thank you. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussions by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives to indicate if they wish to provide views or questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call the scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committees. I will permit group leaders to speak once on each item. Voting will be taken by a show of hands in the room. Only Cabinet members attending physically may vote. Sorry. So next, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. And we have apologies from Councillor Turkin, Councillor Hercombe, and Councillor Mason. Are there any other apologies? We have apologies from Councillor Stark and Councillor Corbett. Next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? None, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, 20th of July, it's a while ago now. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Cabinet members, are you content that the minutes are an accurate record and should be signed? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is to receive questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We have received 5 questions for this meeting and the responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or attend the meeting to ask their question live. Supplemental questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Okay, so I will now ask the clerk to confirm how many supplementary questions have been received.
We've had 4 supplementary questions from members of the public. The first one is from Steve Kerry. The supplementary question is, the answer does not address the broad issue of policy which I raised and is clearly an attempt by officers to deflect this into a specific matter I did not mention, nor did I refer to changes being imposed. I said implemented. Will the cabinet member now answer the question I actually asked in his own words?
Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Mr. Carey, for your supplementary question. Yes, I agree that all councils should speak with each other when there are proposed changes to governance, processes or anything else in order to help and support each other. I understand that the working relationships between both Herefordshire Council and the numerous parishes across the county is very good, and long may this continue.
Thank you very much. Next supplementary question, please.
Thank you. The second one is from Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group. They replied to, sorry. So it's from Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group. They replied to the published answer that this is excellent news. Their supplementary question goes as follows. Thank you. We are very grateful for the specific detail you have provided and the trailblazing approach that will no doubt offer some hope for beleaguered businesses in the county after many dark years. We are also grateful that we are seeking ways to reduce the cost of credits, speed up acceptability, support privilege, mitigation schemes. HCLG are also very supportive of the ecological betterment that has been created by the population, as it is very important for us as purchasers of the credits. Given the incredibly difficult trading circumstances of the past years, would it be possible to rapidly expedite the credit purchases by making the backlog a priority focus and streamline the process? HCLG would be happy to help. Would it also be possible for a public statement to be issued to explain that there are no ample credits available and to celebrate the collaborative endeavours of Herefordshire Council and Herefordshire home builders? It would be beneficial that any statement explains that developers are funding the mitigation strategy entirely. But this initiative will certainly not restore the catchment. Thank you again.
Thank you. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to the Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group for their question, for the positive comments that they've made in framing this question. The Council has already brought in additional planning resources to expedite the processing of the backlog of applications, which can now be taken forward with the credits, prioritising those that have been impacted by the delays. So far, we have made decisions on 6 applications. There are 17 in the process of agreeing Section 106 agreements, and we have written to the remaining 128 applicants to give them the option to purchase credits when they become available. We will continue to promote the availability of the credits as the Construction Industry Lobby Group have helpfully suggested. And whilst the private sector income from the credits will pay for the future management of the wetland sites, there's also been significant public sector investment in establishing the wetlands in the first instance. I thank them for their question.
Thank you. Next question, please.
The next question is from John Harrington. It's the supplementary question is, although you did not directly answer my question, I thank you for your response, and I am very heartened to hear that you will ask the Marshallsford Partnership to add this to their work programme, especially as both Monmouthshire and Powys County Council are on record as fully supporting a new station at Montrose, as are the respective MPs, adding to the support of our own MP, Jessie Norman. There is good news on the feasibility front too. The scheme promoters have met with senior members of the Department for Transport, Transport for Wales and Network, seem assured that there is time on the network, 6 minutes, to allow a stop, and also that the economic case will be considered alongside that of new journeys. We would be very grateful if the Cabinet member would agree to meet the promoters as soon as possible with Jessie Norman MP to discuss this new development. Finally, projects or proposals that have budget lines may be considered policy. So like Kingston Crossing, the new station proposal at Montrose should be discussed in the appropriate manner regarding due process and decisions then made by the Cabinet and full Council rather than potentially being made de facto by inference or back channels. I am sure the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer will and should be able to offer advice on this, and my apologies if I am misinterpreting the change of events. Thank you very much.
Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Harrington, for your question. I would thank you for your response, and as a consequence, I've asked our team to arrange for a meeting with the necessary people as suggested. Your comments regarding due process, etc., are noted, and I can assure you that this council takes very seriously the need to ensure that we adopt and follow proper process to change, if necessary, any of the council's pre-existing policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. And the last question is from Ms. Reid.
Thank you. The question is, the forecast overspend of the Children and Young People Directorate is 10,669,000. Looked after children has increased by 7,772,000 from 26,617 million to 34,790. i.e. 72.8% of the overspend. The council's total forecast overspend is 13.5 million, i.e. 79% is from directorate. The looked after children rate is about twice that of the county statistical neighbours average. The source is from the LAIT. 396 children were in care out 18th of September 2023. The average cost of each child in care for 1 year was fostering over £16,000, fostering agencies over £46,000, children's homes over £260,000. The source is the Freedom of Information request as of January 2023. The above will be anecdotal evidence. The above with anecdotal evidence indicate the necessity for greater pace and focus on reunification. Recruitment of permanent social workers and foster parents are also essential. The Cabinet may choose to refer the underperformance to the Children's and Young Persons Scrutiny Committee, paragraph 1. Will the Cabinet consider this option?
Councillor Powell, please.
Thank you to Ms. Reid for your question and your supplementary question. With specific regard to your reference to underperformance, I think it's important to recognise that there is scrutiny in terms of governance from not only Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee, but also from Ofsted as the inspectorate, and the detail of the discussion at the Children's Improvement Board and the content of the Children's Improvement Plan. So those are important foundations of the governance of progress against the required improvements. So the specific reference to underperformance of children's services leaders and staff, they are working hard to deliver the improvements from what have been acknowledged as a very low base, and they are determined to secure best value for money moving forwards as they build on the improvement activity which has already been seen since the inspection last year. Some of those are formally documented in previous Ofsted reports. And those leaders, service leaders and staff have my full support. It is for members of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee and other scrutiny committees to determine their own forward work plans.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell, and thank you for that question. We now go on to agenda item 5, which is to receive any questions from councillors of Herefordshire Council. We have received one question from Councillor Hitchener, who is here. We've answered the question that's been published, but Councillor Hitchener is here to ask his supplementary question. Over to you, Councillor Hitchener.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Price, for your response. I know that you referred to an increase in costs, which I would suggest will apply equally to a Western bypass. The WSP report from October 2020 showed an indicative price of £55 million for the Eastern River Crossing and the length of Ledbury Road, and £190 million for the Western bypass. I suggest that whatever increase applies to the Eastern Crossing will also apply to the Western bypass, as well as the Southern Link Road. You refer to the Southern Link Road used to be built to provide relief to business traffic going to Rotherwas from the A465, the administration of which you were unable to produce a towards it. What has changed to make this more viable now? What the city and county need is another bridge, not a relief road to the south, which will do very little to relieve congestion on the Belmont Road. Where, Councillor Price, would you expect to find funding for the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass? Is it the time that you accepted that Eastern Bridge will be much more viable and more of a priority? Thank you.
Councillor Price.
There's quite a bit in that question. Thank you for it. So a number of items you want addressing. We have support for the Eastern River crossing. We're awaiting for the ACOM report, which is due, I understand, next week or the week after. We'll take a view as to what it actually says with regards to the strategic outline business case and what it will cost us to fund it. Yes, I appreciate the costs have risen all around. As far as we were concerned in the previous but one administration, we had got the Western Bypass to a point where we were discussing financing with the Department of Transport, Treasury, and we were assured that money was coming forward, and the final business case for planning was due in a very short period of time. The Central Link Road, which we refer, is a policy that we are adopting because it is necessary. Whatever future infrastructure is built around Carriford, whether it's east or west, should have the South Quay Link Road. I have to say that as I've not been a councillor in the last administration at all, I was able to stand back and see what was happening, and I was quietly gobsmacked into the room that I would put for myself that South Quay Link Road was cancelled by the previous administration in which we were involved. It's quite clear that we have to do something about infrastructure for Hereford. The local plan that's coming forward is bringing forward even more houses to be built. We just have to have a bridge across that river. Whether it's to the east, to the west, or both, will get determined as we move forward. But either way, the South Quay Relief Road is a necessary part of either bridge or both bridges. So I'll leave it there at present moment, and we will see how we progress as the evidence goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price, and thank you, Councillor Hitchen, for your question. Right, we move on to agenda item 6, which is reports from scrutiny committees, but we do not have any reports from scrutiny that have been received today. So we will go straight on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 7, which is the Q1 budget and performance report. To review the performance of Q1 for 2023-24 and to report the forecast position for 23-24. This includes an explanation and analysis of the drivers for the material budget variances and outlines the current planned activity to reduce this overspend, forecast overspend. To provide assurance to make sure that there is delivery towards the agreed revenue budget and service budget targets, and we will be showing the reasons for the major variances, potential underperformance, so that they're understood and being addressed by to the Cabinet's satisfaction. The item begins on page 17 of the agenda pack, and I would now like to invite Councillor Stoddart to present the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This report is the first outturn position for 2023-24 and clearly demonstrates the challenges that we face in delivering the revenue budget set by the previous administration in February 2023. This year's revenue budget is £193.3 million, which included planned savings of £20 million, comprising of £14.1 million of directorate savings, together with £5.9 million of central budget savings. Through the adoption of evidence-based approach, I'd like to make Cabinet aware that the Q1 report for the last 4 years has traditionally forecast an overspend. In 2019-2020, Q1 showed a zero forecast overspend and a final overspend of 600k. In 2020-2021, Q1 forecasted was £15.9 million with a final overspend of zero, which was underwritten by £10.2 million of COVID funding. In 2021-22, Q1 forecast was £9.4 million with a final overspend of 5.6, and thus Based on this evidence, it's our forecast that this year's final overspend will be less than the Q1 forecast. As I said, this year's Q1 report currently forecasts an overspend of £13.5 million, and the medium-term financial strategy, or MTFS, which was approved by the previous administration, has an estimated cumulative funding gap of £15.8 million over the three-year period 2024-25, 25-26 and 26-27. And together, these two figures clearly demonstrate the scale of the financial challenge that we've been left by the previous administration. So what are we doing to address this potential £13.5 million overspend, which equates to 7% of the net budget, with the most significant overspend being in children and young people services of £10.6 million. We must first acknowledge that this overspend reflects significant national pressures, including inflation, unprecedented demand for adult and children's social care, and national living wage increases. Recovery action has been identified to reduce the cost pressures by £4 million, and the timely delivery of this activity is a priority for the Cabinet. This recovery activity includes restrictions on procurement and non-essential spends, target reductions for third-party spends, and a reduction in the number of interim and agency staff, as well as a number of directorate-specific measures. I would draw your attention to Table 3, which shows the revised forecast in light of these current management actions. Improvements in children's services are supported by a robust three-year financial plan. Activities planned within the service over this period is expected to reduce the reliance on agency staff and move the balance of social workers to a mix of 90% permanent employees and 10% agency staff. The lack of sufficiency in children's social care placement and the above inflation increases in residential placement costs will be monitored over this period to manage the financial impact where possible. We'll also review our efforts to recruit in-house foster carers to reduce our need to use independent fostering agencies. These actions will address head-on the challenges of delivering our children's services as part of a three-year strategy to deliver improvements in the quality of practice whilst taking children's services to a long-term position of living within their assigned budget. This Conservative-led administration is fully committed to reducing the in-year overspend to avoid future pressures. As part of this strategy for the setting of the 24-25 budget, we'll adopt a three-pronged approach. Firstly, this report sets out the immediate management actions to deliver savings through controls, and I can confirm that these actions will continue and will be developed further into next year. Secondly, we will invest in the economy to generate growth. And third, we will innovate to increase revenue through maximum utilisation of council-owned assets. We acknowledge that it is only through investment in growth and thus increasing our future revenue that we can address the long-term funding issues that we face, and this will be clearly demonstrated next week when we discuss the capital programme, which will show how we'll be investing in jobs and infrastructure across the county. This strategy will also be underpinned by the administration's belief in transparency and openness, and will be supported in the recommendations of the report, which includes a request for active engagement by the Scrutiny Management Board. I would like to congratulate the finance team, ably led by Andrew Lovegrove and Rachel Hart, who have prudently maintained the Council's reserves in a healthy state, as shown at Table 1 of the report. It would, however, be remiss of me not to make Cabinet aware that these reserves have reduced over the last 3 years, from a total reserves figure of £114.7 million in March 2021 to £106.1 million in March 2022 to this current figure of £91.4 million, which I fully understand has been due to the requirement to provide additional funding for children's services. Despite these significant challenges, and contrary to the reports in the media, I can confirm that Herefordshire Council's financial position is stable. We have a robust governance framework, our reserves are above average level for unity councils, and we have low levels of borrowing. The most recent Value for Money report by our external auditors gives a green rating for financial stability, noting our above average reserve levels for unity control, low levels of borrowing, and robust financial planning arrangements to identify risks. The Council's accounts for 2021 2022 received a clean audit opinion, and the 2022-23 accounts were published by the statutory deadline. And I would like to note that we're only part of the 30% of local authorities who met this deadline. The last year's accounts are currently being audited, and this timely preparation and audit of the accounts provides valuable external assurance over the accuracy of the Council's reported financial position and performance. I would now like to invite my Cabinet colleagues to endorse this report and its 7 recommendations, and to raise any questions that they may have.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Councillor Gandy.
Thank you. You will see from the report that the projected underspending is predominantly within children's services. And one of the ways that is being considered is to replace agency staff with permanent staff, which is not just good from a financial point of view, but it's absolutely the right way to go for our children. Can the portfolio holder advise me as to what measures you are taking to reduce the use of agency staff and to replace them with permanent staff? Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Excuse me. So just to track a little bit to add some context to this. Obviously, the use of agency staff carries a financial premium, and the service is working hard to recruit more permanent workers and to reduce that reliance on agency staff over a 3-year period. That will then enable a stable and resilient workforce going forwards, and that obviously will make a positive and sustainable difference to the lives of children and families across the county. There is, of course, consideration currently at central government level, so we always also look forward to seeing anticipated government proposals in the coming months with regard to that important national issue of recruitment and retention. Specifically, locally for Herefordshire, we have increased our welcome bonus in September. And of course, alongside that, it was equally important that we extended a retention bonus for those long-serving, loyal, quality staff that we have. We've strengthened our induction process locally, and we have increased the range of learning and development opportunities for our workforce. What we do know, talking to our workforce, is, of course, they come to a place of work to do a job and they get a salary, but for many of our staff, most of our staff, it is not only about the salary, it's about other issues such as conditions of working and how they feel valued, and learning and development is a really important part of that. I think it's important to reflect that our permanent staff are telling Ofsted, the inspectorate, in each of the 3 monitoring visits delivered most recently, that they like working in Herefordshire and for Herefordshire, and in particular they value the support from their managers. This is helping our recruitment activity and challenges the historical position that we've experienced, that Herefordshire was a less than attractive place to work for those who are interested in a career in children's social work and supporting children and families. We also plan to further develop our Spirit of Herefordshire website and simplify the application process, about which we've had some feedback. We're planning a series of open days, so potential candidates can attend those open days, and also we're looking to enable them to be interviewed on the day, should they so wish. And we are also ensuring attendance at employment fairs across the region. We are developing our communications plan in this regard, which will include radio advertising in the region. We have increased the number of our apprentices. Benita and I found it really interesting and heartwarming to go to a recent face-to-face group with some of those apprentices at different levels on the schemes. And importantly, it is a topic that many raise with me. We are looking at all of the options to grow our own workforce here in Herefordshire.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. I'll speak briefly as a cabinet member for the environment, if I may. The directorate doesn't have a massive overspend. They are working very hard to balance the books, and I'm confident we'll get there. The recent news from DLUC that the planning fee review is likely to be brought forward, I think could be very helpful in that respect. So we're confident working hard on the budget there. I'd like to thank Councillor Stoddart for his report. I thought he did an excellent job. I got a couple of questions though. As an chair of a scrutiny committee and also member of the Scrutiny Management Board, I know how important it is that we get good engagement over the budget revenue, and so I was wondering how he was intending to engage with the Scrutiny Management Board to make that to fully realise the potential of that relationship. And the other thing that I'm interested in is one of the cost pressures that we're facing is inflationary pressures, and I'm just curious as to how we factor that in now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smallhurst, Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Councillor Susan, those great questions. First of all, then, if I draw you on the scrutiny management piece, as we state in statements in recommendation 6 or recommendation F on the report, we would welcome engagement with the chair of the Scrutiny Management Board and how they can engage with us through the coming year. I'll offer that in an open and transparent method in order that we can work together and you can hold us to account and we can work with you in the future. So we look forward to how we can fit that within your busy schedule. Secondly, regarding inflation, which obviously is coming down, as we all know, but as part of the budget setting process for 23-24, amounts were built in to reflect increases in fuel, wage and energy inflation across the Council's contracts and purchases, as well as the impact of the pay award. Assumptions were subject to review and challenge through scrutiny as part of the budget setting process. However, as we go forward for 24-25, we will work to prepare the budget for next year and will continue to monitor the impact of inflation on current expenditure, and this will draw on a number of relevant sources to determine the rate of inflation appropriate to each of the types of expenditure. Assumptions around inflation will be documented for review and challenge as part of the 24-25 budget setting process over the coming months.
Thank you, Councillor Gandy.
Yes, I'd like to refer to the community wellbeing budget, which at the present moment is showing a 3.3 million overspend, but is projected to get that down significantly. One of the reasons that we are in this situation is demand is demand-led, and obviously it's very, very difficult to forecast. Traditionally in adult social care, it fluctuates throughout the year. However, the summer we have seen an increase in the number of people requiring support from the local authority, and that is mainly due to the inflationary issues going forward. And so a significant number of people have dropped below the income threshold for privately funding their care, and we are having to pick up that funding. We are confident that we will be able to deliver the savings that are required around the transformation, and we're working hard to do that. We are working to deliver these savings during this current financial year, but due to, again, a shortage of permanent social workers, it is likely that you will not actually see the savings in some of these areas until being delivered until the 1st of April 2024. We gave in that particular forecast, there's an all ages social care project, 2.6 million. We have spent 200,000 of that. We gave all of our providers, I think it was previous administration, gave all of our providers an 8% uplift in their budget but we did not give that to the daycare providers. And the daycare providers obviously were feeling the pinch exactly the same way that the rest of the providers were. And so we took the decision during the course of the year that we would give them an uplift as well, which came to a total of £200,000. So of the 4 million that was given to the previous administration in the fourth quarter of the last year, we have spent 200,000 of that on uplifting people who are providing daycare facilities. The other problem we have is supported living and respite. When the savings were put forward at the beginning of the previous financial year, some of the savings relied on us being able to obtain data which would give us a complete understanding of those in supported living and requiring respite care. Obtaining that data has become a challenge, which we were not expecting. And that has meant that staff are finding it very difficult to actually unravel from the system the data that is required for us to identify the number of people that are in supported living and receiving respite care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gandy. Any more comments from Cabinet or questions? Councillor Price.
Yes, can I thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for your very good presentation and very competent presentation, and it's clear that you're on top of your subject. I still do have concerns of the budget, the overspend, that was no chance of ever getting it down to where the budget should have been, based on how it was set. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Two are about reserve, which I'll come to later. The first question is, what else, in addition to the actions shown in paragraph 45, do you believe can be done to take forward the action plan?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Price. The Children's Service Improvement Plan provides a clear set of actionable actions, or achievable actions, I've got my pardon, that take them to a long-term position of living within their budget. However, we will remain fully open-minded to any further actions that are identified that can assist us in achieving that plan. So whilst we drive forward the items in paragraph 25, we'll remain completely open to any ideas that can come from any avenue that we will look to then drive that cost down to enable children's services to live within their budget.
Okay, thank you for that. For my benefit, and probably for quite a few, there's a couple of things with regards to activation with reserves. So we talk about reserves as if they're in various aspects. So maybe you could clarify what each item in table 1, the reserve, what they actually mean.
Sorry, thank you for that. So table 1 is the total list of all of our reserves. So the general fund balance, which currently shows £9.6 million, this is the revenue resources available to meet future commitments. So it's in line with the Council's agreed policy that this reserve is maintained at a level of approximately 3 to 5% of the net budget. The earmarked reserves, of which we have none at the minute, this is set aside from the general fund for future expenditure to support specific corporate priorities that we see. The financial resilience reserve, currently it's £1.2 million, this represents amounts set aside to support financial risk, so purely financial risk, so interest rates, things like that. The business rates reserve of £13.1 million, this is to smooth the impact of changes in business rates, retention, collection and their funding. The schools balance, currently £9.3 million, this is a balance held for individual maintained schools. The waste reserve of £9.4 million is to support increased future costs of waste disposal and collection services. The unused grants carried forward area of currently £17.6 million. This represents amounts of grant funding that we've received with no grant conditions attached and conditions have been met, which have not yet been applied to relevant expenditure. And then lastly, the other reserves of £31.2 million, which represents the smaller individual reserve balances, which gives a total balance at the minute of £91.4 million. I hope that's answered to you in as best I can.
It does, thank you. You mentioned in that the financial resilience reserve. At point K, it states the transfer director underspend in 23-24 transfers to the financial resilience reserve. Can you explain what that statement means?
Certainly. In the event that any directorate delivers an underspend in financial year 23-24 through successful delivery of the recovery actions or stretch of savings that we've alluded to in para 14, it's proposed that these underspends will then be transferred to top up the financial resilience reserve, which is set aside to manage future financial risks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Galley.
Can I ask one more question with regards to children's services? And that's to do with how much and what use do you make of the voluntary sector within Herefordshire to support your service?
Okay, thank you. So the short answer to that question is across the whole council, in fact, but specifically children's services, engage actively with the voluntary community sector to see where they can provide support, add value, in particular in the area of early help. But notably, a very specific and timely example, I think, is there's been an opportunity that the council have undertaken with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and that will be the provision of £1 million worth of funding spread over 2 years. That funding is grant funding, specifically aimed at voluntary and community sector organisations. There are some specific measures within that, but suffice to say, is focused on matters such as avoiding children, young people and indeed families coming into contact with criminal justice agencies early, seeking to reduce vulnerability, seeking to make sure that children, young people and families are better connected to their communities so they don't engage in criminal activity or antisocial behaviour. So that is due for launch in the next few weeks. I think £1 million worth of funding over the next 2 years, specifically focused at our voluntary community sector, presents both a significant opportunity in my view, but also represents the worth and high regard that we have for that particular sector across Herefordshire.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brain, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. You mentioned the reserve of other unitary authorities. Could you just give us some indication as to where Herefordshire does sit in, if you like, the league table? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenner. So the most recent annual auditor's report confirms that the balances held in our reserves are reasonable and prudent to meet existing pressures and address future challenges. This report benchmarks our reserve levels with the other unitary authorities and notes that we hold above average levels for this group. And we'd like to again use that to confirm again that contrary to reports to media, our Herefordshire Council's financial position is stable.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments or thoughts from the Cabinet? If not, there's an opportunity for group leaders to make comments if they wish. So, any group leaders who would, Councillor Harvey first.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for the confident report that he gave in presenting this agenda item. Of course, confidence does butt up against bluster, and I think there may be some elements of bluster in the rhetoric that we've heard here. But I don't blame him for that. It is a tough Q1 report to be presenting to us here, and I have sat where you're sitting now, although the overspend that I was faced with was less than half what you're presenting to us here today. So it's good to hear that we have a reasonable and prudent set of reserves, although I don't wish to school you on the subject of reserves, Councillor Stoddart, but looking at table 1, we don't have no earmark reserves. You actually just talked us through a whole series of earmark reserves amounting to almost £82 million. If you need any more detail on reserves, I'm very happy to assist, both through Scrutiny Management Board role and as a late handover if that's what you'd like. And I welcome the recommendation in the report that Scrutiny Management Board gets given jobs to do. However, I will remind all Cabinet members that I did send an email to you all and to the leader on the, I think it was the 1st of June, offering you the opportunity to engage positively with scrutiny, all the scrutiny committees and indeed Scrutiny Management Board, and holding the door open for suggestions from you for areas of inquiry that you feel would be fruitful. I did get holding responses from Councillors Gandy, Lester and Powell. I didn't hear from you. I don't mind you coming late to the party on that, or indeed for any Cabinet members to take us up on that open offer. I think scrutiny is the other side of the governance coin for an authority which has a Cabinet system, and sort of challenge and critical friend role is not to be underestimated in terms of being useful to you all in ensuring that we get strong decisions made in the best interests of the county that we represent and the people that we serve. I've got a couple of questions, and I'll state them here in case they need a bit of thinking about. One of the recommendations is that there is a monthly update that is provided. So my question is, will those be made public and or shared with scrutiny? I'm surprised you're not doing that already. That was something that we had as a Cabinet coming to us monthly on the finance side of things. And I note that you're saying that the management actions are predicting that the overspend will go from 30.5 to 9.5, but you already know what the Q2 outturn is, and you've known that for the best part of a month. So I'm wondering, are you prepared to share with us what that Q2 figure looks like? Because you've known about this Q1 position for in excess of 3 months now. So I'll leave that with you to think about a little bit. I can say now that scrutiny will be very keen to be looking at the whole budgeting process and in detail at particular areas of the council which are causing concern. But I do worry that you may have taken your eye off the ball during the transition to your minority administration. We were really on top of the whole issue of budget management and the concerns that we had about the approach to managing finances and understanding the implications of decisions that were taken in the children's services area. And this really is a very large overspend to be forecasting. And when you look at the management action that is being proposed to be taken, that isn't giving a dent in the overspend that is expected to continue for children's services. And may I say that as a Cabinet last year, when we were putting the budget together, we gave our officers every opportunity to tell us where they felt there were real challenges and taking the savings up front and not providing a properly profiled 3-year look at how these sorts of these sorts of savings need to be delivered, particularly when it comes to transitioning from agency workers to permanent staff. That is not something that can happen overnight. And we did ask for a properly profiled timeline view of how the savings were likely to be delivered in reality. And it doesn't sound to me like that is something that's actually happening. And when we get stuff coming to scrutiny, or when you as cabinet members get stuff coming to you from officers, please be asking for deadlines, for time scales within which things are going to happen. We had stuff coming to children's scrutiny earlier this week, not a deadline in sight, not a time scale in sight. And, you know, I want to see those, Councillor Powell. It's really, really important that we actually understand when these things are going to happen, because if we linearly profile savings to be delivered and actually they're back-end loaded, every single month that goes by makes it more and more difficult to deliver that savings profile if we're assuming we're going to get savings being delivered, particularly in terms of staff, from the 1st of April. It just isn't going to happen. So please can you make sure that the delivery plans for your savings are properly and realistically profiled, and that you challenge those, because you're certainly going to get challenged and scrutiny on that, because I haven't seen a properly profiled delivery plan yet. I'm not, sorry, I do have to say, having been cabinet member for finance, that the figures that were put into the budget, taking account of inflation, were on average around the 8% figure across the budget. And I've just looked up the inflation figures that are online now. CPI 12 months to July is at 6.9. Goods down to 6.1. Services a slight increase from 7.2 to 7.4. If you're going to be making explanations, I won't call them excuses, explanations, the kind of pressures that are being faced, please make sure that they stand up to even a basic level of inquiry. I can't believe that inflation is playing a big part here. There are other things that are playing a much bigger part. And, you know, don't give us fluff, give us the truth here. You know, we can take
Councillor Harvey, we must progress things.
Finally, we're giving results in terms of performance against the delivery plan for Q1 that does not exist. I was being promised through the autumn last year and the final quarter that a delivery plan was in development, which would enable a delivery plan for this financial year to be coming to Cabinet and being adopted in time for this financial year. We have not got a delivery plan, even in draft that's been circulated and seen to my knowledge. And, you know, I would ask, where is the delivery plan and how can you be reporting results against it when it hasn't been published and it hasn't been adopted? And I'm quite concerned that, you know, this hasn't happened. We're halfway through the financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. The development plan is in progress.
Delivery plan.
Delivery plan, yes, it's in progress. Thank you for that, and thank you for raising all of those issues, and we really do welcome the Scrutiny Management Board if they're up for the challenge of reviewing the budgets. Right, Councillor Chapels, was it?
Can I have my question answered, please?
Yeah, we'll answer the questions after all group leaders have their comments.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for your introduction of the report. And, you know, I sort of want to start this by saying, you know, I have quite a degree of sympathy for the position that you find yourself in. I mean, Liz, you know, would say she's been on the other side of this room in that chair. And from my perspective, the financial challenges that are faced by this council are caused by a whole bunch of issues that are largely out with the control of the council, and I'm going to go into some of those in a minute. But I would just say I was a little disappointed by the little political dig in your introduction around the situation that you've inherited from the previous administration, because you will know very well that the challenges in children's services are something that the previous coalition administration we took seriously. Finally, after years of problems, we turned over all of the stones, identified the problems and put in place the action plan to deal with them, and that is very expensive, as you have articulated. And I'm going to come back to some of the issues there in a second. We were really scrupulous in not making that issue a political football at all, and I think it would behoove all of us across all groups in the council to take that approach. I am really pleased that you realised that this council is in a sound and stable financial position with excellent reserves, above average for our comparators. That is unfortunately not the impression that local residents might have received from political material that was put through their letterboxes in March and April this year. So I'm glad that you clarified that position for everybody, and that misinformation has been countered now by what you explained. To the question of what is being proposed here, which is a whole bunch of measures that are outlined in this decision report to deal with the fact that there's a very significant predicted overspend this year. There is no fat left on the bone in local government and in Herefordshire Council. You know that as well as we do, I'm sure. And that is because we have had well over a decade now of austerity and lack of central government funding for local government, lack of prioritisation of the essential services that local government provide for local people, and that is extremely disappointing and worrying. And I'm worried by the measures that are outlined in this report. For example, the cuts to community wellbeing savings that are outlined in paragraph 18, they all sound quite dry, but they add up to yet further cuts below the bone the services that we provide as a council to people who are already really, really struggling. And I worry about the long-term impact on people of those cuts. This report says that the financial and operational impact of these changes will be assessed, but it doesn't say that the well-being impact of these cuts will be assessed. And I think it's critical that we really keep our eye on the ball of what is the effect on people, real live people, local residents, of cuts to the services. I come from this morning a community event in my local community, actually a talk community event at which a local voluntary service organisation was pulling together a whole bunch of voluntary sector people to reach out and provide services. And at that event, I was buttonholed by somebody from one of those services who was outraged that this morning they had received a letter telling them that a capital fund a council-run capital fund that they'd been encouraged to apply to, they got a letter this morning telling them that it had been shelved. So they put all of this effort in applying for capital funding. That fund has now been shelved. Councillor Powell, you were talking about a new fund coming on board, but it sounds like giving with one hand while taking away more with another hand. And for the local voluntary sector organisations that are crucial to providing services, but not a substitute for government-funded services, it's essential that we don't have this stop-start sort of situation in which they put effort and time into applying for funding and then it's taken away at the last minute. So that's really deeply concerning, the effect of this on real people and real organisations. I am worried, as I said, about whether we can really have confidence that the measures outlined in this report to deal with this predicted problem are not going to create further problems down the road. And that's because I think that there are three reasons why we've got this projected overspend in children's services, this £10.6 million projected overspend in children's services just this year. And they're all about failure to plan for the long term and about short-term cuts having long-term impact. Number one, the total failure of this Conservative government to adequately fund local government. Funding for local government has been slashed for the last 13 years, funding for other essential public services. And what we are seeing is that our social services are having to pick up the pieces from that. We need a proper long-term funding settlement for local government. We need multi-year funding. We need more funding that takes kind of cognizance of the fact that it costs more to provide rural services in sparsely populated areas. None of that is being done, and I think it's absolutely shameful. The second reason we have this problem is because decisions were taken under financial pressure some years ago, for example, in the middle of the last decade, to remove an entire layer of management within the council's children's services. That caused problems, which we have then recognised in more recent years, put in place action to address, put those people back in because they played a really vital role in quality assurance, in supporting frontline staff. So we've recognised that that sort of cut had terrible long-term effects. And the third reason why we've got this problem is absolutely about the failure, and again, I pin this squarely on central government, to manage the lack of social workers in this country. We've got this crazy situation where there's nowhere near enough qualified social workers in this country. There's nowhere near enough funding to enable people to train as social workers. And there's no national regulation of the market in social workers, which means that individual social workers face incentives to take agency jobs and to be able to work in, to move around to different places. Whereas what we need as the council, and crucially what the people who need the support of social workers need, is consistency, long-term, people in permanent posts. And until national government grasps that nettle, manages this chronic lack of social workers and manages this crazy situation which actively incentivises social workers to take agency jobs, then we will be really, really struggling. So I welcome the measures that you've talked about, Councillor Powell, which sound very familiar because they're exactly what the previous coalition administration was doing for about 2 years to try to tackle this problem. But there's a fundamental problem, which is a national level problem. And so my question to you, Councillor Stoddart, and specifically to you, Councillor Lecter, is will you write to Michael Gove, Secretary of State, will you write to the Prime Minister to say what we need threefold? We need long-term, proper funding, multi-year funding settlements for local government that recognises the increasing need for social care, both children's and adults, and funds us accordingly, because otherwise it's the bin collections and those sorts of things that get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to the bone, because these statutory services take up so much requirement. Will you write and ask that this problem of the regulation of social workers is tackled and that funding is put in to enable more people to train for these absolutely vital frontline roles, which all of these services depend on? Because I will be writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Childs. If you can share with me that letter, I'll read it and consider it. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to the...
Yeah, we'll take all the questions from group leaders and then we'll respond to the questions, please. So, any other group leaders who would wish to comment?
Yeah, no, sorry. You're coming down the line, as it were. I just think we're leaving in, well, Groundhog Day here. So the problem exists, and a lot of people have got a lot of blame here. Central government, I agree totally with the previous two speakers, with the fact that we've had this approaching £60 million in central government grants has declined over the recent years. We wouldn't have a financial problem if that was the case. But also, I think that the detail, for instance, I think it's touched upon the balances, and here we are. We're in a position of earmarked and unearmarked reserves, and we're presenting a picture that is slightly better, or considerably better than it actually is, because we should have this laid out about what are the reserves in effect are truly earmarked reserves and reserves, because we've got to the point where we have to put in out of reserves nearly £10 million this last year. Now we're looking at 13.5, I think it is, million, and now projected, but hopefully not that amount. That will more than wipe out the unreserved, unallocated reserves. Now I know that the earmark for certain of these headings mean that we can actually go into that, like the financial resilience reserve, et cetera, can be used. But, you know, we can get to a point in a very short period of time where we ain't got any reserves to be able to do anything about this. We can't go into, for instance, school balances. There'd be uproar throughout the county, there'd be a revolution if we do that. You know, and I think we need it laid out in a way that people can see the true financial condition within the county as a whole. And when I hear, you know, I do worry about this, talking about you know, I think council's done a very good job so far, and you know, it's doing so many things that need to be done. I'm actually getting down on the ground floor of it and dealing with the problems that exist there, which hasn't gone on for many years in children's services. But you know, we've had this business. I mean, we're putting so much importance in the idea that we're going to get full-time social workers. We ain't going to do. It isn't going to happen like that. And I think it was Councillor Chams or Harvey said about actually profiling how we're going to make these savings. I don't think you can, because we've said this before. It's been said by this council for 10 years. We're going to reduce the number of agency workers. We're going to do that. Well, is that the case that they've done nothing over 10 years? They had no ideas how to get this problem, solve the problem? They have, but the problem is, A, we do not have sufficient social workers being trained, and now all the cards lie in the hands of the social workers, because they can pick and choose, and it suits them to be agency workers. A, they're financially better off, and B, you know, gives them some sort of resilience or flexibility in their lifestyle, and it's not going to change overnight. So don't think that suddenly you're going to save this sort of amount of money very quickly, because I don't think you will see a massive reduction in the cost of managing the social workers. But also, what is more important, I think, also about social workers is that they're trained in a very different way. And much of the problems we've had in children's services is caused by the way in which social workers have interacted with families within the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. And Councillor Matthews, did you want to?
Yes, just briefly, Leader. I don't quite know what to say. Actually, all I can report back to where we've failed over the years, and if we'd have been listened to and other people have been listened to, we wouldn't be in the state we're in now. It's a very sad day for this authority finds itself in such a serious financial state, which will result in the public getting a very poor service, even though it's been totally inadequate over recent years as well. So it's obviously, from what's been said, it was getting worse. Myself and my independent colleagues have pointed out the same issues as Ofsted in respect to children's services, but the last few administrations have failed to deal with the issues raised, costing the taxpayer somewhere in the region of 70 million in overspend. Councillor Powell, I'm confident that he will get we have also discovered serious financial flaws in respect of a number of capital projects where we had to inform external auditors to deal with the matter because of this seriousness. Why I'm saying this is it's been building up over years, and our local economy that would have been far more healthy if these sort of things hadn't happened. There's been a lack of growth with very few new businesses to provide well-paid, secure jobs into the county to provide for our many talented young people. We have failed in respect of this issue in the past. And again, you know, it's no good talking. I know that Councillor for Economy or what have you is trying to deal with this matter. Well, of course, the main part of this is a total lack of appropriate infrastructure. In particular, getting the A49 to Rossall Wild upgraded, which our business have been asking for many years. That's part of the other suggested improvements. Sorry. This is something our MPs should be urgently addressing. They don't seem to be taking much action on this matter, with the full cost being solely on the highway agency and not this authority. They should be dealing with the A49 and dealing with it urgently and getting the improvements done. Value for money, all members will be aware that some contractors are paying the taxpayer, and instead of the council addressing this matter, we have merely placed a financial burden on the taxpayer. It's time we started to run this authority more along stringent business lines and cut out the waste and incompetence. There's a lot of improvements to be made without a little cost. The reserves, we've got the reserves that's been suggested. We've got to bear in mind that it's only a few years ago we sold all our council small buildings, and £45 million went into the reserves. And as I say, so our reserves should be healthy. So it's obvious that for several years, the less money will be coming from the central government. That's been obvious for years, the whole world situation and everything else. We just got to put our own house in order and become more efficient and more competent. And you know, it's sad really when we hear all the different things that have been said. I'm pleased that the issue of infrastructures appears to be dealt with, and I'm also pleased that Councillor Price is keeping all options open, because the cost of some of these things, because what we don't get, all the other things that are being said going nowhere unless we've got a prosperous local economy, delivering the secure paid jobs, bringing in new businesses to provide the rates to help to drive this council forward through these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, group leaders. I just want to go back to, there were two questions from Councillor Harvey. One was the monthly updates. Will they be shared publicly and with scrutiny? Can I have clarification on that point? Thank you. Mr. Lovegrove.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to share the documents. That's pretty much for the what information I need. We have an awful lot of information. So start a conversation with chairs and understand with the information we provide to scrutiny.
And with regard to the information about Q2, that doesn't finish until the 30th of September, does it?
Yes, we are 3 days away from it, we're very close, but we can't find Q2.
Thank you. So Q2 is coming down the line, okay?
Can I just have a query on a point of accuracy? In tables 2 and 3, the revenue budget column, although the total is correct at the bottom, the figures in the column for the directorates don't match the budget figures that were approved at full council. And I give us an example, the all ages social care line is showing us 2.6 when it was 4 million.
Some of it's been spent.
Oh no, this is the budget line, so this is what it should have been. What it was set out to be at the beginning. The forecast is what you're planning to do with it. And actually, on that point, I'm rather concerned that the whole point of us putting 4 million into that all ages social care line was to deal with trying to bring about some overlap and commonality in terms of the way that some services are dealt with in a seamless way across adults and children's social care.
Okay, we'll get some clarification on that point.
And you're not planning to spend any of the money on that and are taking that as a saving?
Yeah,
that is
we'll get some clarification on that point.
It's critical that those efficiencies and improvements in terms of joined up social work across adults and children's are actually implemented.
Yeah, well, thank you for spotting that, and we'll get some clarification on that point. Thank you. Okay.
Can I
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, there was a question sort of embedded in what I said, which was about this fund, this capital fund for the voluntary sector that was shelved this morning.
I was going to answer the question.
Sorry,
What-
yes, councillor Gallagher.
I mean, there will be more detail at the next cabinet meeting when we discuss the capital programme, because it was part of the previous administration's capital programme. The letters that went out this morning went to every single organisation that expressed an interest in that particular project. There was a significant number, significantly more than would ever have been able to cover the amount of money that you put aside in the capital programme for that particular project. And so therefore, I cannot comment on whether the particular organisation you went to would have got that letter anyway, because they would not have been successful. But at this particular moment in time, every organisation who we know spent an awful lot of time putting their plans together, it was the expression of interest, no more than that.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Okay then, right, we move on to the recommendations. Recommendations A to F, G, are proposed. And Councillor Stoddart, are you going to propose? I'll second that. All those cabinet members in favour will vote in the room. Okay. That's that recommendation. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone's contributions. We now move to item 8, which is the housing benefit risk-based verification policy. And the recommendation is to approve the adoption of the risk-based verification policy in determining evidence requirements for the assessment of housing benefit claim. This matter resides with Councillor Stoddart's portfolio. I will ask him to comment.
Risk-based verification, or RBV, is used when processing all claims to housing benefits and council tax support. RBV allows the council to focus resources on the claims where there is a higher likelihood of fraud and error, and to pay low-risk claims more efficiently. Herefordshire Council has used this method of verification since 2012-2013, as permitted by the Department for Works and Pensions, and the external audit testing for the housing benefit assurance process has been undertaken on an RBV basis to comply with the required testing procedures. RBV is a software application designed to profile benefit claim data to produce a risk score. The risk score is derived from a mathematical assessment based on historical intelligence and statistical information about which claim types represent particular risk. For the purpose of applying verification on a risk basis, each claim is ranked into one of 3 categories: low, medium, and high, with verification and documentary evidence requirements aligned to each risk profile. As stated earlier, we have used this method of verification since 2012, and I fully recommend to Cabinet that we approve its use for financial years 2024 and 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Do I have any comments from councillors on this item, cabinet members on this item? No? All keen to recommend we adopt the policy. Group leaders, Councillor Chance.
Thanks. I have a question relating to how assessments of housing benefit entitlements are made. A case was recently raised with me of a resident whose landlord changed letting agents. The new agent charges higher fees. The housing benefit has been reassessed and the award is lower than it was, meaning that this tenant, whose circumstances have not changed at all, they're still living in the same house they've been in for years, they're struggling financially anyway, and they've been assessed with their circumstances changing and the full cost of their accommodation is not paid. I understand there is definitely more than one person in this situation in this particular housing development, and I'm sure it's much more broadly raised than this. I passed this on to the ward councillor for this particular person. Are you aware of this issue? Is it something that we will please look into? Because it seems absolutely mad that agents can be charging higher fees and then those are, you know, this resident has no control over it at all, and yet they're being sent into debt by decisions of landlords, agents, and indeed the council's housing benefit. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. Whilst this is not about housing benefit entitlement, it's about how we assess the risk in fraudulent claims. But what I can say is I'm very concerned of raising your issue, and please, can I say, if you can raise that to me and send me the details, I'll give you my assurance I'll look into that and speak with the financial officer and we'll resolve it. But thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Councillor Hartley, you had your hand up.
Yes, the Independent Herefordshire Group is supportive of us continuing to use this method to manage risk with fraudulent claims, particularly if it speeds the payment of claims that are considered to be low risk. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate all the areas of the benefits and finance team who work on minimising fraud. It's great to see that we've been nominated 2 years running for awards related to addressing fraud and cybercrime. And it just shows that even if you are a small authority, you can still have excellent practice in this area and be recognised for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, any more comments from group leaders? If not, no. So we have the recommendation before us. Councillor Stoddart again, are you going to propose the recommendation? Yeah, I'll second it. All in favour? Okay, right. Now move on to item 9, which is Marches Forward Partnership Memorandum of Understanding. So this report seeks approval for the council to sign a memorandum of understanding between Herefordshire Council, Shropshire Council, and Monmouthshire and Powys County Councils for collaboration as a Marches Forward partnership. Okay, so the proposed Marches Forward partnership, it provides a basis for the continued and enhanced working with our neighbours along 80% of the Marches, England and Wales border. Our neighbours in the Welsh counties of Powys and Monmouthshire, as well as Shropshire, share many of the issues, opportunities and challenges in terms of an ageing population, low productivity, access to workforce connectivity, our continuing concerns about the environment and the access to key services such as health and social care. We have many shared goals, and so it makes sense for us to work together. In these challenging financial times for all councils, it's also essential to share our knowledge, best practice and work collaboratively to deliver the best services for our residents. Those people in our respective counties live and work and study and spend their leisure time travelling across our administrative borders and can often face confusion when it comes to accessing public services or uncoordinated public transport. And different priorities for the infrastructure development. Through the proposed Memorandum of Understanding for our 4 counties, it will be committing to a strategy of working together through the Marches Forward partnership. We will work collectively together to address these issues and realise the shared goals and opportunities. We will also work together to influence the UK and the Welsh governments, and it is critical to get investment that we need to level up our rural economies, and in particular through investment in critical infrastructure such as the A49. The other 3 councils have considered the draft Memorandum of Understanding, respective cabinets over the course of September, and have all supported the decision to enter into the high-level agreement to provide a framework to take forward our joint discussions and working. So I know some of the cabinet have raised queries about diverting some of the officer time away from the priorities of the council, and therefore through the leaders group I will ensure that they remain focused on improving services for our own residents. I've also suggested that we bring forward the proposed review of the enterprise to 12 months, and to also ensure that there is a positive proposed activities that remain on track and add value. I would also like to make more explicit on the Memorandum of Understanding under the Objective 3 that we ensure that connectivity includes major infrastructure requirements. If we decide to enter the memorandum of understanding, this will all by no way prevents us from forming any partnerships or continuing to work and develop with key partnerships with our other neighbours such as Worcestershire or Gloucestershire or the West Midlands Combined Authority. So, subject to Cabinet's views today, if you're in support of taking forward this memorandum of understanding, I will be meeting the leaders of the other councils on the 6th of October to finalise the agreement and thereafter, launch an event that will be held in November. I'm conscious of the fact that we had a political group consultation which gave some really important feedback, and I'd be really keen to ensure that that feedback was also brought in mind when it comes to the Chief Executive being delegated to add to the wording of the Memorandum of Understanding. Do I have any comments from Cabinet members? Okay. Any comments from group leaders? Councillor Harvey first.
Yes, thank you. Independence for Herefordshire is broadly supportive of this. Hopefully it builds on the good relationship working that was initiated on the Phosphate Commission with these local authorities and extending that to Shropshire. I hope it's not going to be some way of sort of zombification of the dying Marches LEP, and that we actually have something that is a new entity with some fresh thinking. It's our county proposed and had supported at full council a notice of motion a number of years ago, requesting that the council write to ministers seeking a minister to be given portfolio responsibility for borderland issues. And it's a long time since we made that request. Hopefully Brexit has brought home to Westminster that borders are important, and good fences make good neighbours, and that we need to understand borderland issues. I think we're a little bit behind the curve compared to our North of England colleagues. The Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal was approved a number of years ago, which straddles the Scottish sort of North of England, Northumberland borderland area. But if we can take any lessons from how that inclusive growth deal is progressing, and also lessons from any mistakes that they feel they might have made along the way which tripped them up, I think that would put us in a good position to be looking to create something similar for the Welsh borderlands and Marches areas. But I think borderlands are important. We do need to understand how we work across those lines, however and wherever they're drawn. And we know that we do have in Herefordshire significant health tourism from the Powys area into our hospital, and residents in Powys do rely strongly on being able to access healthcare services at the Hereford Hospital. But it is something that is just one example of infrastructure that we have here, which is actually providing really strong services that are valued into a borderland area. And I think if we can make this work, great. I'm not a great fan of sort of punny names, so I'd rather it's called something else, but that just because it doesn't have an element of a pun about it. But broadly we're supportive of it, and if we can reinvigorate the request for Westminster to be recognising borderland issues, maybe we can get a minister's eye, or a fraction of an eye, on borderlands, as well as making progress on the ground here ourselves with our partner authorities in Wales.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Chance.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Cross-border partnership working can only be a good thing. So, in that sense, the Greens fully support that type of partnership working. I've got some specifics though, but before that, I'm glad that you referenced the political group consultation, Councillor Lester, because I was disappointed to see that its comments and indeed the group leaders consultation weren't included in this paper, and I think it would be good going forward if we could make sure that political group consultations were held in time that those comments could then be included in the decision reports, so that there is that degree of member input and informed scrutiny, if you like. I welcome all sorts of things in here, like the call for improved bus coordination. I'd like to, I'd like to think that there's something in there about improved frequency and coordination of rail services. It's been pointed out to me that there was a complete mess on the Leicester-Hereford line at the end of last week. Transport for Wales. Repairs overrunning, no train services, no replacement bus services. Let's try and make sure that the existing services that we've got run better before we start, developing new ones. So there's clearly coordination issues needed there. I have got a few questions, particularly around the way that climate change is referenced, both in the covering report and in the Memorandum of Understanding, and I raised these in group leaders consultation, and both documents talk about climate adaptation in several places. But climate adaptation is only half the story. Climate adaptation is when you say, oh, well, it's going to get 7 degrees hotter, so we just need to make sure that we change the tarmac we're using so that it doesn't melt. That's climate adaptation. Climate mitigation is reducing greenhouse gas emissions to try to reduce the severity of climate change, and that is absolutely crucial, and that is the business opportunity and the thing that will improve well-being for people in our communities. So I'm really puzzled to see only climate adaptation referenced in this report, and one of the tweaks that I'd like to suggest that the Chief Executive takes back to the group is to suggest that that language is replaced with action to tackle climate change, or climate action, rather than only mentioning adaptation, because that is the real degree of confusion. Elsewhere in the MOU and in the report, there is reference made to opportunities for green growth. Green growth is top of this agenda, apparently. So it would be great to see that actually taken forward. A specific question, paragraph 7, you talk about short-term opportunities for more efficient and effective service delivery. I mean, can you give us any examples of what that might translate into? You've talked about the risk of officer time being diverted into this. What are going to be the immediately deliverable benefits of this that residents will see? It would be good to have some kind of some specifics there. Paragraph 14, in terms of the objectives, the first objective of this partnership appears to be to collect better data. I'd suggest that you might want to reorder that, so that's a kind of supporting activity, isn't it? It's objectives 2 to 5 that are really crucial to this partnership. Maybe that needs a little bit of thinking, and all of the objectives are phrased as working together. I would suggest that working together is not an objective in itself. What are you going to achieve by working together? The working is the activity. There's no mention of well-being in objective 4. We're talking about strong communities only insofar as they contribute to the economy. I think it would be useful to acknowledge that people have value in and of themselves, and we might want to recognise that. Paragraph 11 mentions road infrastructure as a particular focus. I wonder why rail infrastructure isn't mentioned, or indeed other types of infrastructure there. And that brings me on to paragraph 21 of the report, which really, there's no other way to describe this than an extraordinary example of the kind of doublethink that we've sadly come to expect over the last 10 days from central government, and sadly appears to be making its way into this report. Because to say in the same sentence that your administration's priorities are to build a bypass, protect the natural environment and tackle climate change demonstrates, the most extraordinary level of wishful thinking. Those three things are not mutually compatible. And to continue to suggest that the solution to congestion was to build bypass is simply ignoring the hundreds of pages of evidence. So the absence of logic in that single one-sentence paragraph 21, would be laughable if it weren't actually so worrying. You found the alternative factor character of the paper. The very next section is about, the opportunity for the partnership to enable local authorities to support each other on net zero and climate action. So which is it, Councillor Lester? Is this a partnership about facilitating road building, or is it a partnership about seizing the opportunities of the green growth agenda, meeting our net zero legally binding commitment, and helping to shift this county and neighbouring counties onto a path of sustainable growth? I would really like to know, because there are many things that this partnership could and should work on. Rail integration, bus integration, including campaigning with central government to actually give funding to local authorities like ourselves, which they have not been doing. Skills infrastructure, health and care infrastructure, and a regional programme, how about this, of home insulation and business energy efficiency, because we have an utter lack of progress on that at national level. If we don't do this with this partnership, it risks marching backwards, not forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other group leaders wish to comment? Okay, well, Councillor James and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. I would say those that can do, those that can't talk. I express my concerns to you about becoming a talk shop. The people have had enough of talk. They want some action. And, I was worried when I saw this, and I saw the structure of, the chief executive group, the directors group, the cabinet members group, the various groups of all. There are people who love turning up to meetings like this one and talking endlessly. We're not in the position to have that sort of resources going into those sort of things all the time. I'm comforted by the fact that you gave an assurance that that's not what it's going to be. It's about coming together of specific issues and perhaps having a joint approach to doing that. But it's going to be very difficult because we're 4 different councils with 4 different political makeups. So it'll be pretty limited as to what you'll be able to achieve to get agreement on individual things. But if you can on some things, that would be great. But I worry about spending too much time and effort on talking.
Okay, Councillor Matthews, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor James's comments. The county benefits, as I see them, is it should help us in infrastructure issues, because Wales and Shropshire either side of us have been telling us to get our act together for long enough. And environmental issues, pollution of the River Wye, etc. Again, working together, we should make progress on that. So those are 2 very important issues. But also, I also share concerns that others have raised, that this doesn't become a heavy financial burden, and that we're running all over the country, a lot of talk, a lot of expenditure, and getting nowhere. So it's going to be closely monitored to make sure that we're going down the right road. Just as a matter of interest, back 10 years, I worked closely with Welsh Government and Welsh officers for 5 months, and with Network Rail and everything, and I put a scheme in place. They all agreed, Network Rail and everybody, that Pontyler should go ahead for a fee of 6.8 million. That was to bring it into Hereford and a good link into Rolwich. But sadly, we didn't get the support and funding to carry that through. Otherwise, that was a benefit of working together. Just an example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. And there's many things one could say about the comments that have been made. Yes, there's the reservation about best use of time on this enterprise. There's lots of scope here for joint working and to address all of the concerns that have been raised in debate here. And I take on board the points that Councillor Downs makes about the memorandum of understanding, wanting to see greater scope in certain areas, and that information has been taken on board. Will be taken on board, sorry. The publishing of the recommendations of the political consultation had to come later, which is published today, but it had to come later, simply because the timings of when an agenda is published and the timing of when the political consultation occurred. So it's a shame that it wasn't put in the report, but I take the point, and we listened very intently to the recommendations that were made in terms of the issues that arise when it comes to cross-border issues. And I think one of the best ways of reviewing the effectiveness of this working relationship is how it tackles some of those knotty border issues that persist, will always persist, and closer working, I think, will be a great way of trying to tackle those issues. But, you know, this is a memorandum of understanding. It's not a document that's set in stone. It's to facilitate greater working with our partners where we think it's appropriate. I think that's a really positive thing that we should be exploring with our neighbours. And I look forward to this matter progressing so that we can review it in due course to see what benefits we're getting for Herefordshire and to see if our partners are getting benefits from the enterprise as well. And so I think we should proceed as accordingly in the recommendations set out. And I ask for Cabinet members, I shall propose from the Chair, and I would ask all Cabinet members to vote accordingly. Okay, thank you very much. There's one more item on the agenda. And it is agenda item 10, which is the High Needs Capital Grant, Hampton Dean Primary School, extension of the Language and Communication Centre. Councillor Brayman, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I bring to the committee the report sponsored by the Director of Children's and Young People, Councillor Ivan Powell, and I'm delighted to bring this report, which is the extension of the Language and Communication Centre at Hampton Dean Primary School. So this is essentially a good news story for children in Herefordshire, and Cabinet has been asked to approve the High Needs Provision Capital Grant to extend Hampton Dean Primary School, its Language and Communication Centre. We have a statutory responsibility to provide sufficient high-quality accommodation for pupils with educational, health and care plans, and for education of special needs and with disability. The number of children with education, health and care plans for which the council are responsible has been increasing over the past 5 years, and this increase is expected to continue into the future. The highest primary need in Herefordshire has been identified as autistic spectrum disorder, otherwise referred to colloquially as ASD. The Language and Communication Centre at Hampton Dean caters for children with speech, language and communication needs and for ASD, with 16 places currently available for each specialism. The unit has been full since 2018, based on its intended capacity. However, that school has continued to admit children, taking their numbers to 50% above capacity. The need to offer more places to meet the demand has resulted in the creation of an additional autism hub in 4 mainstream schools, as well as proposed expansion at Hampton Dean. The aim behind the opening of these units is to limit the number of pupils having to attend schools either out of county or in the independent sector, which comes at a significantly higher cost to the council. The expansion will include 2 additional classrooms with the appropriate support space, toilets and outdoor space, and will be a flexible learning environment that will accommodate the 16 learners. The council has received ad hoc high needs provision capital grant from the DFE. The balance remaining to be spent at the start of 2023 to 4 is 3.97 million. Grant funding is provided in order to create additional places and for improving existing provision for children and young people with special educational needs disorder, particularly those with needs that are more complex. The extension of the Language Communication Centre at Hampton Dean School will be one of the number of projects that will come forward in order to fully utilise the grant money above 3.97. I recommend to the Cabinet This is a long needed provision and some good news for a lot of children in the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bramer. Are there any comments from Cabinet members? Real positive use of monies to provide that central service. Any comments from group leaders? Councillor Chowns and then Councillor James.
Thank you. I've got two questions about this. Obviously, great to be providing these facilities for the continued and very positive police support. One question is about advanced planning for kind of future such developments. I'm taking as read that this is the most important use of this high needs funding at this time. Will the capital programme review that is coming to us next week kind of provide some update on what future educational facilities might be needed for specific groups? Because this is, as far as I recall, the first that I've heard of this one. So that's question number one. Question number two is about the standards to be employed in building this extension. The previous administration adopted a policy that all new school buildings would be built to Passive House equivalent standard, not necessarily the kind of, the stamped that particular thing, but to Passive House equivalent standard. And the reason for that is because those are high quality, healthy building standards and highly energy efficient. Now, all of the previous decisions that we've taken over the last few years in relation to school buildings specified that, if not in the main body of the report, at least in the environmental impact section. But this one contains notably vague language in paragraphs 18 and 19 in particular. So I would like to have assurance from the Cabinet member that this school will be built as existing council policy and practice for the last few years to Passive House equivalent standards. And following on from that, I'm a little disappointed to see in paragraph 17 that there's no plan to retrofit the main part of the building, i.e. to do any energy efficiency measures in the main part of the building. Surely this is the obvious time to do it when there's building works happening on site, disruption anyway to the site. Is this not a good opportunity to explore and take forward any obvious kind of, win-win energy efficiency measures that could be put in there which will benefit children and young people in there?
Thank you, Leader. I would say to the councillor that when I read sections 18, 19 and 21 and the environmental impact, I was delighted that we were actually following such an environmentally biodiversity net gain. I also like item D, E, F, H and G on section 2. But if this isn't a good enough assurance, I'd like to call upon the officer, Freeman, to give you a further assurance.
Hi, Councillor Chowns. Yeah, I can help with that. Yeah, we will seek to use passive measures in building and designing this. The issue that we have is that we are adjoining a current building. Like if you alluded to, we can't use this money to retrofit that, and we have no additional funding to look into that. So the fact that we're adjoining that building, we couldn't categorically say within this report, i.e. what I wouldn't want to do is put that in the report and not be able to deliver it, but we'll seek to use passive measures. We'll seek to obtain a biodiversity net gain. And what it's about is making sure that that building uses less energy in the first place. So ultimately, the overall footprint of that building will have a lower carbon footprint, but what we can't do is categorically say we'll get Passive House plus accreditation, but it will use passive measures.
Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. Just to clarify, so using passive measures, as you well know, is not the same as achieving Passive House equivalent standard. I'm not asking for Passive House plus, I'm asking for Passive House equivalent, which is what we have done over the last few years, and you're very familiar with that, I'm sure. I'm also asking you just to specify that, asking the Cabinet member to specify that that will be done for the new build section. It's disappointing to hear that you've no funding to do retrofit of the existing building, but can we at least make sure that when we're building new buildings, we're not building things that are going to need fixing up again in 10 years? Practically everybody I speak to on the doorstep in Herefordshire thinks it's madness if people are still building buildings that are not well insulated, not incredibly energy efficient, and not good quality. So please, that passive equivalent commitment for this building?
Well, the officer's given the assurance that the appropriate steps will be taken as much as possible. And
that's not an assurance, Jonathan. That is very helpful, sorry. We have a policy.
Answer the officer, and that's the answer. Thank you. The point about the capital, you wanted assurance about the schools in the capital group, and we will provide that clarification for you. Okay. That was the point that you requested, was it not? If I understand that correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great point, and we will make sure you get that clarification. Any more group leaders? Sorry, Councillor Harvey, and then Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Leader. A couple of questions from on behalf of the Independence for Herefordshire Group. First of all, are we going to ensure that this build project is professionally project managed? We delivered under budget and to time on the other school work that was done when we got professional project managers in who specialise in delivery of schools extension programmes. And the other question is, given that the school, there is significant demand for the kind of speech and language support that this school provides, are there going to be any improvements, sort of 21st century type technology that will enable other schools to be able to access the sort of expertise that is centred here, and to help to reduce the need for pupils to travel and actually be educated at this school, as opposed to access the kind of support that's needed remotely or less frequently than full-time education?
Thank you. Well, the first question, I think, if we could ask Quentin Lee to answer that one, and then the second question I would like to refer to Mr. Freeman. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey, could you just repeat that first question?
It was about professional project management of the build project.
So it will be our management office that will lead on this, and we will employ a suitably skilled, multidisciplinary team to both design it and then deliver it. So yes is the answer. That will be happening.
And with regard to 21st technology, that's exactly the type of approach we're taking with all new build facilities at the moment, and will also be a part feature of our future sufficiency strategy that we'll bring forward later in the year.
Thank you very much. Other group leaders, Councillor James.
Thank you. Can I just wholeheartedly welcome this? You know, it's a positive thing, and we need to be positive about it, not negative. You know, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we were talking about my concerns about the budget, and this is an indication. This is going to be expensive, and it's only the tip of the iceberg what's actually needed for this type of young people. You know, and we need desperately more, but we haven't got the money and sufficient to satisfy the need that is there. And so, you know, I welcome this, but let's hope we can someday get substantially more facilities like this.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any more comments? Any more group leaders that wish to speak who haven't already? No? Okay then. Right, okay, we have the recommendation to make sure that this exciting project goes ahead, which is going to be a really good facility that will really help those children who need it. So,
like to propose back there.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favour? Thank you very much. That concludes the items on the agenda. So I would just like to thank everyone for attending and all of your contributions. Thanks to the Cabinet, and to group leaders for expressing their views and asking their questions. The next Cabinet meeting is scheduled for 2:30 on Thursday, the 5th of October. I will now formally close the meeting. All members of the public are requested to leave the building promptly. Please ensure that you've taken all of your possessions with you and return your visit pass.